All right. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Gani Otukogbe. So you're welcome to the PhD Bootcamp. And interestingly, this will be our first cohort. We've had boot camps in the areas of digital technologies in the past for people that want to do web development, software engineering. But this is the first one we'll be having for the PhD. And we hope it's going to be a very engaging and a fruitful one for everyone. So being the first one, there might be some little gaps. We'll hope you bear with us, but we'll try our best to give you as much professional input as possible. And then part of this presentation, you get to know the objectives of the boot camp and then what you tend to take out of it and gain out of it. And then the facilitators involved, their professional background, and a little bit about their own PhD journey. So the agenda for today, so you meet the team and then the bootcamp objectives. Then we'll do an icebreaker. That I think we might push it back a little bit to later on. We'll do this intro for the next 30 minutes, and then we'll have one of our facilitators in the person of Professor Biliamin Oborian from South Africa, University of Johannesburg, who will facilitate the writing of a successful PhD proposal. And then the structure of the bootcamp, we'll talk through it. Week 1, which is this weekend, and then the week 2, which is going to be next weekend. And then we'll look at the PhD journey. How does it look like in a linear way, even though the PhD from experience can be very cyclical and iterative. And then we'll signpost also some of the useful resources online that we could easily access wherever we are. So my name is Gani Otukogbe. So I'm a lecturer in project management at Cardiff Met University. And currently I teach modules that deal with project data analytics, commercial project management. I've taught modules around risk management in projects, strategic project management. And then I teach business intelligence and IoT to MBA students as well at Cardiff Metropolitan University. In my other roles with other universities, I do teach apprenticeship and degree students from institutions like Arup and then Taylor and Townsend in the UK. So I did my PhD at the University of West of England and then in digital construction with augmented reality. And then my first degree is in estate management from University of Ife. And I have an MBA from Cardiff Metropolitan University and an MA and PGC from University of Huddersfield in the UK. So I was part of the UK government funded augmented reality building information modeling project at UWI, which was £1.8 million. And that was what my PhD was based on. So this is one of our PhD coaching fellow, is a senior colleague, is in the person of Professor Biliamin Oborian. So Professor Oborian has been in academia for well over 20 years. He finished his first degree from the University of Ife, Obafemi Awolowo University now, where he did chemical engineering. And afterwards, he proceeded to South Africa. So he did his master's, his PhD in South Africa, and became a full professor at the University of Johannesburg. He has supervised several PhD students, is active on LinkedIn. You can easily Google him. And then he has published in highly rated international journal articles, journals. So secondly, we have another one of our PhD coaching fellow in the person of Dr. Babatunde Salami. So Dr. Salami is a senior lecturer in project management at Cardiff Metropolitan University. As you can see, he's a colleague and he's a friend. And then he has his background in civil engineering. He did his first degree in civil engineering and second degree in civil engineering. He had his first degree from the Obafemi Awolowo University, and then he proceeded to King Fahd University in Saudi Arabia, where he did his master's in civil engineering. And then he did his PhD in construction materials and management in Malaysia. He has published severally in highly rated international journal articles. He's a very, very prolific writer and researcher. He's highly engaging on LinkedIn if you want to know more about him or you want to get to know him more. I think that's a very good platform to get to know him. He's going to be one of our facilitators for this particular bootcamp. And then finally, the third person is in the person of Dr. Shakira Atoyebi. So Dr. Shakira Atoyebi has his PhD from the University of Liverpool, and he is a pharmacist at the same time. He did his first degree and second degree at the University of Ife, Obafemi Awolowo University, and he finished with distinctions. So he's been part of the UK government funded, he's part of funded projects in the UK, and he was a Duncan Norman Research Scholar for his PhD. He's currently working at the University of Liverpool as a postdoctoral research associate and specializes in perinatal pharmacology. So Dr. Atoyebi currently is with us online at the moment. So what are the objectives of the bootcamp? So what do we need to get out of the bootcamp? So in order to achieve that, we got to keep everything in focus. And that's why we have this image of the camera, because everything must be in focus. Whatever is not in focus is edited out and it's not needed. Yeah, so the first thing is how to master the structure and key elements of a research proposal. So we'll give you sample structure of writing a research proposal at the PhD level. And what are the key elements? What are the key parts of it that you need to pay attention to? And a part of it, because it's an extensive and rigorous bootcamp, you'll be able to develop and refine your research questions and your methodology. And these are very key if you want to successfully get any PhD scholarship or get accepted into any PhD program. The key things they will be looking for, they will look at your research questions. And before they look at your research questions, they'll be thinking of what are your research objectives? Are they things that you can achieve within the time span? Are they things that there's evidence that there's knowledge gap in that particular area of study that is worth researching for at least 3 years or 5 years, as the case may be? And then they will be looking at what methodology are you proposing. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but they need your potential supervisors need that conviction that you have the research methodology know-how, because without that, it's going to be a real tussle for them. And then we'll look at how do we synthesize literature and then justify the research rationale. And finally, we'll get feedback and then finalize the proposal. So we'll come back to this because we're not that many, and I'm mindful of the fact that Professor Oborian will be here with us in the next 20 minutes to do the presentation on writing a successful PhD proposal. But perhaps as the presentation goes on, hopefully we'll have enough people to come back to this icebreaker. Likewise, then. So this is the structure of the program. So for the first weekend, this is day one. We'll do the meet the team and icebreaker. We've done meet the team. We've introduced the team for this particular cohort in terms of this bootcamp. And then we'll look at the structure of a research proposal. So there might be slight difference in terms of how the timing goes, but We'll cover all this content, God's willing, at the end of the bootcamp. So at the top of every hour, just 10 minutes before every hour, we tend to have short breaks. And then feel free to get your cup of tea, your water, whatever. And then if you need to, if you are the type that you can't write for too long and you need short breaks, maybe you want to do the Pomodoro approach of maybe every 20, 25 minutes, feel free to do that. But what we want is we need to see the productivity. And that is why we encourage that by the time we start the actual writing, try to be on camera so that that serves as a purpose for you to focus. Because when you are off camera, having taught for several hours, hundreds of hours online to students from diverse backgrounds internationally in the UK and abroad, it's obvious that when people are off camera, they tend to lose focus easily. And that distorts the engagement. So we'll talk through the guidelines for writing a successful doctoral proposal, which Professor Oborian will be with us in the next 18 minutes or thereabout to present. And then, just like I said earlier, just 10 minutes before the hour, we'll have short breaks. So at noon time, individually, we'll go online using like Google Scholar to search for relevant journal articles with regards to what's the research area we're trying to explore. As part of that process, we'll look at online opportunities using platforms like jobs.ac.uk to look at potential PhD proposals that we could write, especially the ones that are funded. There is one that was embedded in the invite on on WhatsApp from BCU, Birmingham City University, which prompted this particular bootcamp. You can explore that and see which one you're most likely to be interested in. And part of what our PhD coaching fellows will do is to help you, to guide you through that process of identifying how do you write a strong proposal. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll go for a 1 hour lunch break as a form of recess for people to relax, people to do other little things. And then when you come back at 2 o'clock, you'll do so this is where you start doing the real work yourself, and that will take the shape of the bootcamp going forward afterwards. So you're going to start writing the introduction section. However, this is not set in stone. For some people, they might want to write like abstract. For some, they might want to start with maybe methodology. Another person might want to start with literature review. People approach perhaps do differ. And because the writing process is not set in stone, what is most important is at the end of the day, we have a successful proposal in place. So which phase or which stage of your writing you start with is really up to you as an individual. It's up to you in terms of what is most convenient for you, what is the approach that you're most used to. However, because we are operating with a group and we're expecting 20 participants at least, we have to give structure. And this is why there's this structure of how we intend to take the writing program. So we've tried to follow the sequential order of the IMRAD approach, which is the introduction, methodology, result analysis, and discussion section. But for a proposal, there's no result per se to talk about. There's no analysis. There's no discussion or conclusion to make in that context. But there are still elements of what we need to focus on in terms of the introduction, creating the context, where we identify the research gaps, the rationale for the research, the justification for it, and then what are the objectives, the research aim or aims we want to go out there to achieve at the end of 2, 3, 4, 5 years of the PhD, or as long as perhaps it might be. And then what methodology would we use? and perhaps literature. What are the seminal literature text, the extant text existing in that particular field? So we'll go back to our normal routine of the 10 minutes break at the top of just before 3 o'clock. And then between 3 and 3:50 p.m., we'll come back and explore how do we write our research rationale, our research questions, aims, and objectives. That's a lot packed together, but we'll see how it goes. And then we'll have just the short breaks again. And then 4 p.m., we'll have individual feedbacks. And then between 4:40 and 5 p.m., we'll have reflections and takeaways for tomorrow. So that's for day one. And then day two, for this first weekend, we'll do like a recap at the beginning of the session early in the morning. And then we'll look at doing critical literature review. Like I said earlier, this process is not set in stone for individuals. You can navigate it as most suitable, as most comfortable for yourself. However, for the bootcamp, we'll follow the structure. So we'll repeat the process of having the short breaks just 10 minutes before the hour. Remember, you feel free to like take short breaks if you're using the Pomodoro approach, for instance, or you feel a bit lethargic and you need to stretch and you need to go to the maybe restroom or something like that. That's fine. Or you get a cup of tea or a bottle of water, whatever. Or perhaps breakfast or whatever. And then 11 o'clock, hopefully we'll look at methodology and research design. And then we'll go for the lunch break, just like day one, between 1 and 2. And then 2 again, we'll go back to independent writing. So even though 2 o'clock is being set as independent writing, the nature of this particular bootcamp is that it's hands-on. So where we're talking about critical literature review, it's not like somebody is just going to waffle through PowerPoints and people will just listen passively. The whole idea is it's going to be hands-on. You're going to go back to some of the journal articles you've brought together and then practicalize reviewing it real time, because that's the whole essence of this particular bootcamp. The bootcamp is not just for the facilitators to talk, it's more of the participants to engage, to get their hands dirty, and the facilitators to support. So you have to bear in mind that the bulk of the productivity, the bulk of what you will be able to achieve from this particular bootcamp will come from the effort you put in yourself, because it's going to be individual led. So then at 3 o'clock to 3:50 p.m., we'll do a session on the how to write the writing conclusion of a proposal. This is you working and getting real-time feedback on your conclusion, making it hands-on. And then 4 o'clock is when you do like your sprint writing, trying to like tidy up. And then we'll wrap up, and then individually we'll recap our own takeaways from the day's session. And then we'll take that into the week for us to come back for week 2. Now for weekend 2, what would I expect is between Monday and Friday, you go back and work more on your proposal. At that point, you'll be expected to juxtapose your proposal properly with the particular grant you're trying to apply for, the particular studentship, for instance, or PhD opening you're applying for. You should be able to match them and see if you're writing in line with the expectations of the studentship and the call for proposal. And the significance of this is, if you want to be successful in anything, then you've got to play by the rule of that particular provision. So you need to understand what are the core elements of what they want, the criteria, what are their own main focus. And that is what will influence how your proposal pans out. So this for weekend 2 will be the main focus of the sessions. So day 1 and day 2 is going to be focused on that. We're going to take it away from the point of, okay, you're just writing. Now it's going to be more of, what are you trying to write on? What have you written? Can you improve it? So we'll go through that, get our normal breaks at 10 minutes before the hour. Like I said earlier, if you need shorter time and you need to take short breaks, feel free to do that. That's fine. And then, depending on how fast you're able to finish your session, even if you think you've successfully completed your proposal and you're in a very strong place to submit, feel free to submit to your potential PhD supervisor or the institution you're applying to, as the case may be. So that will be weekend 2 generally, but specifically at the beginning, we'll look at what we've done, a recap of the previous weekend, and then we'll look at the introduction section, the rationale and the research questions. Along with that, we'll explore the research objectives and aims. And then later we'll look at the literature review. So this is more hands-on. This is like workshop. It's based on what you're doing. You get the feedback, and then you go back and work on it. And then you go for the lunch break, and then your methodology section will be looked at to improve it. Now, it now depends on how your work is. However, by weekend 2, we would expect that you have everything in place so that the procedure now becomes very linear. So you can look at the introduction, because at that point, whoever is giving you that hands-on feedback needs to see the sequence in your thoughts, in your writing, in your criticality. So the methodology will be looked at, and then you get the feedback, generic one. And if possible, you have like a small mock review where you'll be asked certain questions just to see if you can articulate yourself to defend what you have put on paper, so that at least perhaps if you are called up for an interview, you have an idea of how to simplify and rigorously and academically defend your piece of work. And the final day, we'll go through this again, looking at the proposal you're exploring, and then trying to make sure everything is in sync with that. So at this point, we would hope that you have something tangible to be able to submit. For some, they might achieve this even this weekend. For some, it might take this long. However how long it takes you, our own hope and objective is that you'll be successful at the end of it, and you successfully deliver what you intend to at the beginning of this particular bootcamp. So generally, that will be the journey. It's going to be a little bit of hard work, a lot of dedication. Your weekend will be consumed, but just be happy that, take joy in the fact that it's just going to be 2 weekends. Which one? The first one is this one, and then the second one is going to be next one. And these 2 weekends, God willing, could be a life-defining moment for you. It could change the trajectory of your own life in terms of your career, especially if you're interested in academia or you've been thinking of doing a PhD or whatever. Because investing that hours, which is going to be about 32 hours, into just a day and a quarter of a day or something like that, or a third of a day. So just doing that could bring you lifetime changes in your trajectory in a very positive way. However, it's important to understand that success, like Robert Collier said he's an American psychologist in the 80s, late mid 80s, mid 1880, mid 19th century, sorry. And that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in, day out. Because if you ask people that have done PhDs, generally, sometimes people think, oh, you have to be highly intelligent to do a PhD, but the reality is more, it's like a case of marathon. The people that normally run marathons are not the fastest humans in terms of speed. The fastest ones are the Usain Bolts, the people that run short distances, 100 meters, 50 meters. They dash and they finish it. But the marathoners, they tend to have ability to endure longer. That grit, that resilience to keep pushing, even when they have blisters on their soles, when they are tired, when they feel thirsty, when they feel hydrated, when they feel exhausted, they keep pushing. And the whole concept of the PhD is like that. So that's the closest metaphor I can see with when you do a PhD. It's about incremental efforts. It's about what you do on a daily basis. How do you progress? I remember a friend of mine that came from Oman to study his PhD in education at the University of Hull in around 2016, 2015. And he finished by 2018. And one practice he used to do was every single day, every day, he would turn up at the PGCR room and he would do some work. Sometimes just a paragraph, sometimes a sentence, sometimes just for him to be able to cite a new material. And successfully he was able to do it. How he got himself motivated to do it daily, even though his family was not in the UK with him. To be honest, I still don't understand, but he used to do it this way and he did it successfully and defended his PhD and finished everything on time. However, we're not yet at that phase. We're still yet at the phase of writing the proposal. So it might be worth it to start developing that rigor, that resilience, that grit by trying to make sure you participate successfully in this particular bootcamp and see the end of it. So this is hypothetically the PhD journey, how it looks like. So we are at this phase where you're trying to write your research proposal. You're thinking maybe in the 2, 3, 4 months time, you get an admission from a university. In the UK, I'm not sure about the US, but in Nigeria as well and some other places, most admissions start in September. But for PhDs, people tend to get admissions different time of the year. Sometimes April, sometimes January, sometimes May. So it depends. But September seems to be the standard period. And then, so when you start, at the end of, for some universities, 3 months, you'll do like a progression exam to see your proposal, you rewrite it again. For some, is at the end of the 6th month, you do the first progression exam. And then at the end of the first year, generally, most universities, particularly in the UK, you would have done, if you're able to progress from the 6 month or 3 months stages, you would have to do a major one in which you now transition into a full PhD scholar. Because prior to that, your PhD is still shaky. You're still not recognized as a full-time PhD student in that context, even though your admission will say you're full-time, for instance, PhD student, or you're recognized as a PhD student, is at that phase. If you're able to successfully complete that, then they'll transition you to say, okay, what you're researching on is worth becoming a full-fledged PhD research. And then in the second year, depending on the speed and the progress, for some, maybe by the 18th month or at the end of this year 2, they go to the field to collect data. Your field could be digital data, it could be anywhere. That is when you start your data collection. And then normally people try to do that. data collection and analysis for another 6 months, or depending on the speed, depending on the efficiency of the individual, depending on the time available and how motivated the individuals are. And then by the 6th month, the end of 2nd year to mid 3rd year, you start exploring. By that time, you would have written maybe your first 4 or 5 chapters, your introduction, your literature review chapters, depending on the number of chapters you have on that literature review, your what's it called? The methodology, data collection and everything, and then you do your analysis, and then you prepare yourself for the Viva. So you have your mock Viva. For some, they have maybe once or twice, and then you have the real Viva. So that is towards the 3rd year. I'm using the framework of the UK as an example. So towards the end of the 3rd year, and then when you do the mock Viva, and you do the main Viva. So usually, if it's in the UK, you have 3 outcomes, potential outcomes. So outcome 1 is you've successfully passed without any correction. It's rare, but people do achieve it. At least I know a friend that did achieve that. No single correction in terms of a comma. And that was at the University of Sheffield, which is even a Russell Group university. And the research was in area of oncology, which makes it even more interesting. Now, for some or for many, sometimes is either passed with minor corrections, which means there's not much problem. You just need to attend to those corrections, and hopefully you successfully completed the PhD, and that's it. And for some, it might be passed with major corrections. So they might have to maybe do data collection again or whatever. They will highlight what the corrections are. But it's not the end of the world. What is most important is to have that grit, that resilience, hope to see it through. But in the extreme case of a 3rd outcome or 4th outcome that is rare, that one would not hope for, is when people are told that their research is not up to PhD standard, and they may have to get like a master's certificate in maybe an MPhil or an MSc or whatever. Hopefully, that will not be the case for anybody. Yeah. So that is briefly the journey, and then you have your celebration with your family and friends, and then you start getting called doctor, or whatever. And then you have to start distinguishing yourself from a medical doctor and just a PhD holder. So these are some of the resources that you could use to help yourself. There's some websites and blog posts by some academics that are very proficient and prolific in the area of research, particularly tailored towards PhD students. And then there's some YouTube channels that I think you'll find very useful. And then there's the Academic Phrase Bank, where you can use for sentence starters, connectives, and whatever when you're writing research work. So that is it. And thank you, and I wish you success. And if we have any question, please. Any question? So in the absence of no question, I think I'll end this session and then welcome Professor Oborian to do his presentation. Thank you.